for the origins in the early church. Let us search for the origins in the early church. Please remember, when we are talking about the first 300 years, in the early church, there was no formal living of religious life. No formal living of religious life. Why? It is important to ask that question. Because the whole church lived a common life, a form of religious life. Early church as a whole, the early church, offered a simple model of radical Christian life, a prototype for all forms of religious life. They came afterwards. You remember reading Acts of the Apostle chapter 2, verses 41 and following. All the disciples were of one heart and one mind. They met in their homes. They met in catacombs, and they lived as one family. And in that family, there were presbyters, men and women, old people, senior citizens, middle-aged group, and young people, and children, and including infants. So, but they all formed one family, one community, and they shared everything that they have. They shared their life together. They lived a form of religious life, the whole church. So then you look at the community of this early church, there were elements of this Christian radicalism there. Attentiveness to God's word, every word of Jesus, they started sharing among themselves. Sharing, and especially the apostles, when they were there, the oral traditions about Jesus, they were sharing. So attentiveness to the word, constant prayer, rooted in Paschal faith, having one heart and one mind, sharing material goods and services, and above all, readiness to give up one's life for the sake of Jesus, because there was martyrdom. To be a Christian itself, was radical, because you really had to choose Christ, and you had to choose, sometimes death on account of the being a Christian. So if you want to follow me, renounce your father, mother, brother, sister, come and follow me, even your own life for my sake. The early Christian community lived this radicalism of Christian living. Okay, so what was the ecclesial situation? The church and this community was a minority, a religion of the crucified, very poor in spirit, no pompousness, no money, no wealth, no power, no prestige, no huge hierarchy, no monasteries, basilicas, or palaces, and big churches, nothing. Their churches were catacombs. And so they lived very close to the original spirit of the gospel. The ordinary Christian faith and radical discipleship had not been divorced. They were one. Ordinary Christian faith and living itself was a radical discipleship. No institutional strength, constant persecution. This was a group pushed to the borders of the society, margins of the society. So the whole church was a liminal group, a group which was pushed to the margins of the Greco-Roman world, persecuted, crucified. They were chased from one place to the other. having no home of their own. A religion of the crucified, poor in spirit. They lived very close to the original spirit of the gospel. Ordinary Christian faith and radical discipleship had not been divorced. There was no institutional strength. Constant persecution came, martyred, and then. So then this is the case. And then martyrdom provided avenue for those who wanted still a radical form of witnessing. There was martyrdom. And there was constant tension between church, which is a minority, and the Greco-Roman world, and the society and the world. There was a constant tension between the establishment and this poor group of the minority, a community of the crucified Jesus. This was the situation for almost 300 years. Remember, 10 Roman emperors persecuted Christianity. Now, okay, now, however, one comment, which is very, very important, which you should remember. Even the early Christian community, we said, no, it was a form of religious life. And this early church, however, lived a radical and liminal witnessing to Christ and to the kingdom as a whole. So the whole church lived a form of religious life, and in living so, the whole church lived a radical and liminal witnessing to Christ and to the kingdom. They expressed that. And then the whole church lived a form of radical discipleship, a group on the limits and the borders of the society, and from the borders of the society, like the salt of the earth, they were slowly, the radiance of this community slowly penetrated through the corridors of the Greco-Roman world gradually. So it had power, and that power of this minority group slowly started penetrating. Because of their radical and liminal witnessing to Christ, they literally lived as what Jesus told them: you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Okay. Now, we come to see the Edict of Milan, a historically significant event. AD 315, there was a conversion of the Emperor Constantine. He was initially a pagan emperor. Gradually, his own, as I told you, this liminal community of the early ecclesial community slowly started, even though the persecution, in spite of the persecution and suppression, this Christian community, like the salt of the earth and the light of the world, started penetrating gradually, slowly, progressively into the corridors, into the Greco-Roman world, and gradually, none other than the mother of Constantine, Helena, becomes a Christian. And under her influence, Constantine, her son, becomes a Christian. And thereby he declared an end to the persecution of the Christians, and he declared Christianity as the official religion of the mighty Roman Empire. And so, from 300 onwards, Christianity became protected and privileged and was transformed into a religion of the masses. Slowly, Christian faith began to be spread through the power of the state, the power of the emperor himself. So there were forced conversions. And the faith of the many became a sociological phenomenon with almost no reference to the radicalism inherent to the Christian living. So people simply joined. So many people joined because of the power and the prestige. So gradually, what happened is too much of adaptation to the pagan world. So money, power, prestige, hierarchy, wealth, all those things started flowing into the heart of the church. So slowly began too much of an adaptation of the church to the pagan world. Until this time, only those who really chose Christ became Christian. From now on, you didn't have to choose Christ or his value. You were baptized, and then only conversion happened actually. People came in masses. It is a mass conversion. As I told you, religion of the masses. So politicization of faith. That means faith began to be spread through the power of the emperor, the power of the state, political powers. So gradually, a collusion with the temporal powers, wealth, and glory. And the church began making false and hidden compromises. Thereby, gradually, a weakening of the evangelical demands, such as contemplative experience, radical poverty, renunciation of material things, sharing of material goods, the need of giving priority to the values of the kingdom above family concerns, the apostolic responsibility of the whole Christian community. All these things began to be weakened. They were no longer considered necessary to become disciples of Jesus. From the Edict of Milan, conversion of Constantine. That is why, sarcastically, H.G. Wells, one of the world historians, said, when Constantine entered the church, Christ walked out of it, he said. So they were no longer, so you were simply baptized without conversion. Until that time, only those who believed were baptized. Now you were baptized, and gradually only you started growing in your faith. Now, the discipleship of Jesus ceased to be considered as a condition for being Christian or belonging to the church. During the persecution period, only the converts were baptized. But from this period on, church had to convert those who had already been baptized. So the church began to lose its saltiness. Slowly began a conforming Christianity, a conforming church, which made secret deals with the world, a pact with the world. This was the ecclesial socio-historical situation. Also, when they got the freedom, people started discussing dogmas and doctrine, and there were a lot of disputes. Arianism, which denied the divinity of Christ and emphasized humanity. Arianism came, and there was human nature, divine nature. All those discussions also started. And you have to remember, the Council of Chalcedon was convoked by the emperor himself, not by the Pope. Because there was division, so much of disputes and conflicts in the church. All this also started within the church. So, gradually, many sincere Christians began to be disillusioned with a Christianity which was conforming to the ways of the world after the Edict of Milan. So, gradually, these people, here and there, when they saw this conforming church and the conforming Christianity, which made deals with the world and pacts with the world, these Christians began to be disillusioned with this type of Christianity. And these people started rereading the gospel. People like Anthony of the desert, they started rereading the gospel, and they got drawn to the call of Jesus' radical discipleship. Son of man who has nowhere to lay down his head. If you want to follow me, renounce your father, mother, brother, sister, come and follow me. Unless you lose your life, you will not gain it. What if you have everything in the world and you lose your soul? All those kinds of text in the scriptures and the calling of the disciples. Calling of the disciples and the conditions which were necessary for the discipleship, all these texts began to influence certain people, and they were people who were rebels at the heart. They refused to accept the false and the compromised living of Christianity. And so, in protest, they went to the desert. They went to the desert. They wanted to see, well, people are living in this way, making all these compromises. Now, all these things are necessary? No. So let me go and live a life for God and God alone and nothing else. And these are the people who said, God and God alone, nothing else. And they were ready to take up any sacrifices for the sake of their fidelity to God. So these men and women were rebels at heart. They did not believe in letting themselves passively guided and ruled by a decadent state and a compromising church. They refused to accept anything short of God, and that is why they said God alone suffices. And these were people who had a radical pursuit and a relentless quest for God and God alone. They were looking for a way to get along without the slavish dependence on the accepted conventional values. They did not intend to place themselves above the society. They didn't say, oh, we choosing this life, we are above other people. No, they didn't say that. They didn't intend to place themselves above the society as though they belong to an elite class. Nor did they reject the society with a proud contempt, as if they were superior to other people. They simply went to the desert as a protest against the compromised living of the church and Christianity of that time. And these people are called desert fathers and mothers. So these were the text. You are familiar with the text, no? These were the texts that inspired the desert tradition, the desert form. Calling of the first disciples and the condition required for discipleship. Now, these texts, calling of the first disciples, conditions required for discipleship, exercised a constant and decisive role in the emergence of the eremitical and cenobitic forms of living in the desert. In the deserts of Egypt, Palestine, Syria, people started living in the deserts of Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. And the famous, Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria of that time, the famous, Antioch and Alexandria were the ancient centers of Christianity. The Eastern churches come from there. And Athanasius was the Bishop of the Patriarch of Alexandria. And Athanasius is the one who wrote the life of Antony. So, in fact, these people were called the first martyrs, white martyrs, because there was no possibility for red martyrdom. Now, the desert fathers and mothers were called white martyrs. So, they were called the white. martyrs. Now, if you, as I told you, Bishop of Alexandria, Athanasius is the one who wrote the life of Antony. But please remember, the life of Antony is not a book that is literally true. It is not to be read as a literal biography of Antony. No. What happened is, when these desert fathers and mothers, when people were going to the large number, they were going to the desert to live a life for God and God alone, many ordinary people were confused. What is this all about? What is the kind of life? Why are they going to the desert? And what must be happening in the desert and all that? So people came and asked Athanasius to explain to them what this new life, new form of Christian life is all about. And Athanasius, in order to explain to them what this life is all about, he wrote the life of Antony. It is a book, it's a hagiographical literature. Hagiographical literature means it should not be read literally, but through writing of the story of a person, the author's intention is always to inspire, explain and inspire and teach the other people some truth. And that is what is called hagiographic literature. Every detail need not be true in that. It's a pedagogical book for teaching. Slowly, you have Antony is considered to be the first desert father, even though there was a Paul the hermit. There was another hermit before that, but Antony became very famous because of Athanasius' life of Antony. Gradually, so you have the desert fathers and mothers living in both eremitical form. In the beginning, they were hermits. They lived alone in the desert, in a cell. Gradually, Pachomius, he developed a communal system, what we call cenobitic form of living. Eremitical, solo, alone. Cenobitic, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people together living. And both were, the desert tradition has 2 forms, eremitical form and cenobitic form. Pachomius is the one who developed the cenobitic form, a communal system to which Western monasticism owes its origin. Basil of Caesarea, Isaiah the Solitary, Evagrius Ponticus, Jerome, Macarius, John Cassin. These people are all responsible for transferring this model from the Eastern Church to the Western Church. There were a lot of women living in northern Egypt. They didn't go to the desert because of sociological reason, but they were living in their own homes. So, in the desert tradition, we have the beginning of eremitical life. A life of clear contrast, a life which is of a clear contrast to a life in the world. As I told you, people started rereading the gospel, got drawn to the call of Jesus to radical discipleship. They began to go to the desert, and these were, now, my dear sisters and brothers, just to summarize, these men and women called the desert fathers and mothers were indeed the founding fathers and mothers of consecrated life in the church. They are the founders in some way. In fact, if you look at the first book on religious life, apart from the gospel, the first book on religious life, you know what it is? The life of Antony only. Even the constitution, monastic rule, even Benedictine monastic rule drew from life of Antony. So that is the first one. Thus, my dear sisters and brothers, when we contemplate the origins of consecrated life in the life of the church, it becomes clear that it originated in the bedrock of this desert tradition. This tradition is the original form of consecrated life, the original form, the seed of consecrated life, with all its primitive radicality, which, however, contains all the essential elements, at least in a latent way. In other words, what consecrated life is all about? What is the essence of consecrated life? What are the essential elements? You will find it in the desert tradition. It's the original seed. Some elements are very strong in there, but some elements are relatively hidden, which, however, contains all the essential elements, at least in a latent, hidden way. So this is the original form. Now, I think we take a 5 minutes break. Father Robin, are you there?
Yes, Father.
Okay. Shall we take a 5 minutes break, or you want to initiate a little discussion? Somebody wants to ask any question or something?
Yeah. You can initiate a discussion, I think, so that others can.
Okay. All right. Then you can ask them to unmute. If anybody wants to ask any questions so far, kindly raise your hand and unmute your mic and raise the question.
Yeah, now they can unmute, Father.
They can, yes. You help them to unmute.
Yeah, already one has unmuted Galaxy.
Okay.
Yes, Father, I have just a doubt.
Very good.
This religious life, like desert fathers, they are the founding fathers, of course. So when it started and the religious life now, when we compare these two forms,
Yeah,
a lot of what you call like differences we feel. No, it's like
you are right. You're right. This is the now. See, let me tell you. From an apple seed, can you get pineapple tree?
not first.
No. So the apple seed in it contains the possibilities of the apple tree, and the different apple seeds can bring forth different trees, but they're all apple trees only. So what is the unfolding reality in the seed? The unfolding reality which is sprouting from the seed, those things are already some way hidden in the seed. So that is why we should study this tradition little systematically, which I will do, because successive forms are further refinement, development of what is in the seed. So there is a difference. That is why the original seed, it sprouted and grew from at different stages. For example, from apple seed, the tree has different stages now in it. First of all, it's a small plant, and then slowly, and then slowly, and then slowly. And there is a real difference between the seed and the tree. So those differences are there. But we have to study. That is why I told you, abiding truth. Abiding truth. Even in the seed, there are certain essential elements which continue to exist even today. Which continue to exist. And other things will pass by, and we have to search for what those essential elements are in order to understand what religious life is all about. We will come to that. Yes, as you are rightly said, there is a lot of difference between that life and this life today. I will explain that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah. Anybody else, please? About so far what we covered, don't ask further into the history, but what we have covered so far, any question, please ask. Anybody else? Hello, somebody, you can unmute and speak, please. Then only a session will be interesting, no? Otherwise, it will be a monologue. Hello.
Yeah,
Anybody?
no one is asking for that.
Nobody is asking. What a funny thing. So many people are there, but nobody is asking anything. I see Sister Jessie there. Jessie, you want to ask something? Yeah. Anybody else, please? Hello? Nobody is asking. Let me take a glass of water, 1 minute. Robin.
Yes,
Hello?
Father. Yes,
Yeah.
Father.
Is anybody there? I don't think anybody is asking anything, you know?
Yeah, you can go to next, Father.
Okay. I am little sad that nobody is asking. Only one person asked. There are so many sisters listening to this, no? There are many. At least one Canossian sister. They are supposed to be an enlightened group. I don't know. Even they also didn't ask a question. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on then?
Yes, Father. Yes, Father. One sister.
Anybody?
Yes,
Please ask.
Father. Yes. Excuse
Okay.
me, Father.
All right. Very good. Go ahead.
From the history, we have learned that along the progress of the world, the religious life and consecrated life also have progressed a lot.
Yes.
And now it is a time to search for the origin.
Yeah.
But very few of us are interested in that origin and to go back to the life. Whether we prefer that life or we have to live as a single person or charism. What do you say, Father?
Yeah. Well, see, that is simply because we have mummified our past. We have mummified our past, our founders and foundresses. We have not, see, you have to remember, beyond the externals, we have to move beyond the externals and try to find out what they were living, in fact. What were the values that they were reinforcing? What were the values they wanted to express? This discovery, this elucidation have not happened. We simply tell stories about the past. We have not rediscovered those things in such a way that the things we can learn. I will show you, in the next session, this particular problem. That is why it is simply a past for us. Nobody is interested. Why is interested? Because we cannot relate to them. So we have to study them in such a way that we are able to relate to them. And in order to relate to them, we have to move beyond the external and come to discover what they were trying to live, what they were trying to express. And those things we need to discover. Only then they become fascinating. They become more interesting to us. And that is why we do this. I know you're raising this, even in novitiate houses also, they teach history, but they teach history in a boring way. You simply tell the past. But what do they speak to the time, our times today? That question must be asked and linked. Okay, so we will see that. Okay, I will try to show you, and whether we can relate to that form. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Father.
Welcome. Anybody else? Otherwise, we will move on. All right. Okay. Now, original characteristics or essential elements of religious life. Now, popularly speaking, we know that there are certain elements that are considered to be essential to religious life. Our understanding normally, when what religious life is about, when we ask, these are the following are the things which are written in the canon law. So when you write a constitution, you will have all these things there. For example, what are the popular understanding of the essential elements are the call of God and consecration to him through the profession of the evangelical counsels by public vows, personal and community prayer, a lifelong formation, disciplining and asceticism required, a stable form of community life. You have to have a superior and you have to live together under some community rules and all. A specific relation to the church. What that relation is, nobody knows. See, the call of God and consecration to him through the profession of the evangelical public vows. Yeah, I have made that and we all have made that. Personal prayer, community prayer. Yeah, I do personal and community prayer also. A lifelong formation. Oh, several years of formation we had. Yeah? And there is also asceticism involved in it. I'm leaving it. A stable form of community life. Yeah. A specific relation to the church. Yeah, we serve the church and we offer our services to the church. Yeah, okay. A form of government calling for religious authority based on faith. Yes, you need to have superiors or provincials and generals and all that. For institute dedicated to apostolic works, a sharing in Christ's mission by a corporate apostolate, faithful to a specific founding gift and sound tradition. Sound tradition. Oh, our congregation, we have very good tradition. Yes, public witness. Yeah, we have to give good public witness. So we have to see how we dress, how we are, how we talk, all that we have to see, and so that we don't offer scandal to the public. Whether you scandalously think and do inside your convent, it's okay. But outside, good. And that is why looking good is very important for religious. Whether you are really good, that's a different question. Anyway, now, these are considered to be the essential elements of consecrated life. Now, my dear sisters and brothers, these are, however, more externals and matters of common understanding. Lifelong formation. Yeah, I had 10 years of formation. But what happened in the formation, how I grew through the formation, I don't know. But I had a formation, yes. Asceticism. What type of asceticism? Is it asceticism for the sake of asceticism? What is asceticism really meaning, really for me? Where is that asceticism? A stable form of community life. Yes, we have superiors and all that. That is also there. Specific relation to the church. Many of these things are externals and matters of common understanding. Now, I'll tell you, you can have personal and community prayer and still you can be a scandalous religious. You can live in a stable community, but still you can be an unauthentic religious person. You have a form of government calling for religious authority based on faith, but still in that you can live an unauthentic religious life. So we have to see what are the elements, essential elements that will constitute you into an authentic religious person. So These are more externals. These are scaffoldings, outside structures, forms, matters of common understanding. We have to try to move beneath these externals and elucidate. Elucidate means bring to light the dynamics underlying it. This is the way, this is what we need to discover. And we are going to do this by looking at the desert tradition. Okay. As we construct an understanding, let me give you certain basic things which you have to know, certain fundamental. Remember, we are going to do fundamental, foundational, comprehensive, formative vision. So certain fundamental structure, how is it? First of all, remember that consecrated life stands in a threefold relationship. Threefold relationship. We have threefold relationship: God, church, and world. Now, everything that, so consecrated life evolves always in a fundamental structure of relationship with God, relationship with the church, relationship with the world. Now, you might wonder why Vita Consecrata has only 3 chapters. The first chapter, consecration. Second chapter, communion. Third chapter, mission. Now you see the structure here. Consecrated life in relation to God is called consecration. Religious life in relation to the church is called communion. Consecrated life in relation to the wider world is what we call mission. So it stands and unfolds in a threefold relationship: consecration, communion, mission. Okay? Right. Now remember this. A value, for example, hospitality is a value. But a value can express itself in a variety of forms. For example, hospitality. If you are from Kerala, you express hospitality in a Keralite way, Keralite form. Hospitality you express in Tamil Nadu in a Tamilian way. Hospitality, when you go to Kashmir, you express hospitality in a Kashmirian way. I hope I am making myself clear to you. So, suppose you go to Germany or America or New Zealand, you express hospitality in that way. So there's a New Zealand hospitality. You go to Uganda and then you have an Ugandan hospitality, which is different from the Kerala hospitality or a Mangalorean hospitality. These are all forms, but beneath the form is a value. So how I'm making myself clear to you. A value can express itself in a variety of forms. Variety of forms. So, to be faithful, it is not enough to know the form. To be faithful, you have to know the value. And to be creatively faithful, you don't identify a value with a particular form. For example, you are a sister from Karnataka or a father from Karnataka, a religious priest, Karnataka. You are familiar with the Kannada way of expressing hospitality. You were, after your ordination or your perpetual profession, you were sent to Tanzania to be a missionary. Now, when you go there, you want to express hospitality. Can you express hospitality in the way you live in express in Karnataka? You have to let go of that form. In order to be creatively faithful, you have to let go of the form that you are familiar, and you have to express hospitality in a way, in an Ugandan or Tanzanian way. Only then you become creatively faithful. So it is not enough to look at the form. It is important to look at the value that is seeking to express in a particular form. So, desert form was a form, and the desert tradition expresses it in a form, yes, but beneath the form are certain values, convictions, dispositions that they lived, manifested, what they are. So to be creatively faithful, it is not enough to look at the form, you have to look at the value beneath it and express that value in a new form today. This is the process. I hope you're following what I am saying. Now, let us, so it's a simple statements here, because when we do this, we have to do this, otherwise you won't understand what I am saying. But there are simple statements. If you have any doubt, kindly write to me, or you can call or write xmanavat@gmail.com, xmanavat@gmail.com. You can make any comments or anything in that way. xmanavat, MANAVATH @gmail.com. Okay, now look at this simple statements. A value cannot stand by itself. Do you agree? For example, honesty. Can honesty stand somewhere? No. It can only, it cannot stand by itself. It has to express itself in a particular form. So honesty in management, honesty in speaking, honesty in the way you relate with your wife, honesty in the way you relate with your father, mother, superior, all your own companions. These are all different forms of honesty. Honesty in the way you do go for shopping. Honest. So, or punctuality. Punctuality in the chapel, punctuality in the refectory, punctuality in the classroom, punctuality in the class where you're going to teach, punctuality in keeping your appointments. These are all different forms of expressing punctuality. So that's what I mean by a value has to express itself in a particular form. It cannot stand by itself. At the same time, a value is not to be identified with a particular form. So, to be a consecrated person, you don't have to go to the desert and live. Desert tradition was a form. So, a value is not to be identified with a particular form, as the two are different. One value can be lived in a variety of forms. Fidelity must always be to the value that can express itself in a variety of forms. This is a meaning of creative fidelity. Creative fidelity calls for discovering timely, relevant, and appropriate and effective forms. You express value in a timely, relevant, appropriate, and effective forms. Chastity can be lived in different forms. Chastity can be, for example, chastity in relation to the way you relate to a friend. Chastity in relation to the way you relate to people of the opposite sex. Chastity in the way you think about yourself. Chastity in the way you love a family. Chase love to the family. chastity in friendships, chastity in interaction, and so sometimes we think, okay, chastity means, abstinence from physical sex. You can abstain from physical sex, but you can be unchaste in your heart. The Lord said that, The Lord said it, you say committing adultery is a sin, but I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has committed already adultery in his heart. Have you heard of that expression? So you need not have, but then you can be very unchaste. So, okay. So creative fidelity calls for discovering timely, relevant, appropriate, and effective forms through which you express fundamental values. Some of the past forms may have been based on erroneous, outdated, worn out, or one-sided philosophical presuppositions. The old form. Now, I'll tell you one simple example. One simple example. In the 4th and 5th century, especially the time of the desert tradition originated in the 4th century, and people believed that demons and ghosts and evil spirits are living in isolated places like the deserts, in the tombs. They believed that devil and evil are living in isolated places, in the desert, in the tombs, in the desert, in the wilderness, where nobody lives. And they said these evil spirits are living there, and they are the cause of the problems in the world. This is the understanding those people had in the 4th and the 5th century. So, desert fathers, when they went to the desert, they were seen by ordinary people at that time. Oh my God, these are people who went into the territory of the devil and defeated the devil in its own ground. So they were considered to be valiant men and women. Now, is it true or wrong? It is somewhere true, somewhere wrong. Now, they were thinking at that time in that way, but that is not the way we think today. That changed. So, some of the past forms may have been based on erroneous, outdated, worn out, or one-sided philosophical presuppositions. Now, I'll tell you one more example. Those days, if you look at the 4th and the 5th century and all that, many of the fathers were emphasizing so much on virginity. Virginity. You might wonder why this virginity is so important. Many fathers used to speak about virginity and all that. Please remember, in the Greco-Roman world, even among the Jews for that matter, even in the Greco-Roman world, there was no institution of marriage. Women were second-class citizens. Second class. Women had no rights. The Roman concubines, many of those Roman emperors had several concubines. And even the Jews also, for that matter, what is the law that Moses gave? If you want to divorce a lady, you give a certificate of divorce and get her divorced and go and find somebody else. That's the way it was. Women had no rights. They were objects of sexual gratification, sexual objects, and they were means of reproduction for the king or the men to produce children. They were simply means of producing children. I'm talking about this is why you need, I was telling, the socio-historical ecclesial environment, and the perceptions are important. Now, In the Greco-Roman world, precisely because of the women were, subjugated and simply used as means of sexual exploitation and gratification, some women protested this and they declared themselves virgins and said, we are for philosophia, apatheia. We want to live a life of dedication to wisdom. And so we are not available for any sexual desire. And they renounced family, they renounced marriage, and they were considered to be ascetic virgins in pursuit of wisdom. I'm talking about Socrates and all those people time, and that practice continued also. Now, when Christianity came, it emerged. These women, virgins, found a way of living themselves, their own virginity, in the background of the Christian teaching. And they resorted to virginity as a means of emancipation of women from sexual exploitation. And so they embraced virginity, and they were considered to be, they were respected and treated with respect, these women. That is the reason why the fathers of that time were emphasizing virginity, because many women found the church as a means for liberation or emancipation of women from the clutches of a patriarchal system of society where the women had no rights at all, no institution of marriage also. Look how the world changed because of Christianity. The sacrament of marriage, complementarity of women, men and women have equal rights. Every person has their own dignity, yeah? And the divorce, if that you cannot simply divorce a woman, all that, look at the teaching of the Lord, what God has united, let no man put asunder. And in the beginning they were one, and thou shalt not, all that teaching, you see. And so this women found, and so when they broke away from the Greco-Roman world and became Christians, they found many, and that is why if you look at the Acts of the Apostles, the early church, even for the apostles, there were many, Martha and Mary, and Mary Magdalene and Martha and Mary and, Samaritan woman, and several of them, were close companions of the disciples, working together with them in the Christian culture. So it is not that, physical virginity was something supreme. It was treated with a different value as a means for emancipation of women from the sexual exploitation. Today, you don't see it that way, because today, women are not treated with us, simply as sexual objects, even in our constitution and, in our own, not only in the gospel, even in the Indian constitution also, you have right. Women cannot be simply treated like that. We have proper institution of marriage and things like that. So now come back to the point. Some of the past forms may have been based on erroneous, outdated, worn out, or one-sided philosophical presuppositions. And chastity was considered to be that you have to keep all your sexual desires under control. And you repress your body. Soul is the only thing. Spirit is the only thing. Flesh, everything of the flesh is bad. And all those kinds of teachings as body, soul dichotomy. All those things are based on erroneous, outdated, worn out, or one-sided philosophical presuppositions. We also know that the reality is not static, but organic, dialogical, and interrelated. And so understanding of evangelical obedience, you have to understand obedience, not in the way that, blind obedience to the superior, whatever the superior says is okay. It is not. Obedience must be also understood in a dialogical, integrational manner. Okay? Because it's, the obedience, when you look at, when you think of obedience, who is the first person that comes to your mind? The superior, but obedience, listening to the superior is only one dimension of obedience. Attentive, vigilant, dialogical listening to God's word that can come to us in variety of ways. This is obedience. but we have narrowed it into a certain form. Okay, so reality is not static, but organic, dialogical, and interrelated. And so we need to, rediscover them, all these things. Now, let me sum up. You may have heard the word disposition. Values, dispositions, forms. Dispositions or convictions are formed through a process of repeated appraisal conditioned by a particular historical, socio-cultural context. So, virginity in those days were understood in a certain way, in a certain form. Today, it's understood and lived in a different way. Now, prayer, in order to pray, you have to pray. Prayer is a value. But you can pray sitting in Padmasana, sitting on a muda, sitting on a chair, sitting on a pew, sitting, or even standing. And you can pray in the chapel, in your room, in the refectory, in the garden. You can pray. There are different forms. Your fidelity must be to prayer, not to a particular form. Repeated, yeah. So every disposition has its corresponding expressions, forms, or acts. All values are essentially disposition. Punctuality, it becomes your value only when it has become a disposition in you. Otherwise it is there. Honesty, it has to become a disposition in you. Truthfulness, it has to become a disposition in you. Patience, it has become a disposition in you. Only then it becomes yours. Now, fidelity must always be to the value that can express itself in a variety of forms and not to a particular form. Creative fidelity, yeah, we have already seen. Calls for discovering timely, effective forms of living, a consecration, communion, and mission. Some of the past forms may have been erroneous, outdated. Okay, we need to search for the new wine skins, new wine into new wine skins. Who said? The Lord said. You can't put the new wine into the old wine skin. You have to recast them. Added to this, we also have to come to an increasing awareness that reality is not static, organic, dialogical, and hence the forms we discover and live must be dialogical and interrelational. For more of it, you come to sannyasa, okay? Now, rethinking and regrounding religious values. That is why there is a real need to rethink and reground the religious values in dialogue with the pluralistic world that we live in. Many of the values, the way we understand them, has to be broken. And you have to re-express that value in creative fidelity. John Paul calls us to develop a dynamic fidelity, adapting forms if need be to new situations and different needs and complete openness to God's inspiration. Okay, now let me summarize this introduction to the part 3. Part 3, facts from my historical perspective. I told you, multi-dimensional lens. And in order to do that only, we have to have this basic structure. So I am making a conclusion from what we have seen as introduction to part 3. Okay. See, historical and cultural changes bring about evolution and lived reality. But the forms and direction that the evolution takes are determined by the essential elements without which religious life loses its meaning. It has no identity. You can evolve, you can change, but the change must always be grounded in certain fundamental essential elements, without which religious life loses its identity. Okay? Always remember this. So let me conclude. Consecrated life unfolds in a threefold relationship of consecration, communion, mission. Sometimes you wonder, Father, why do we need all this structure of understanding? Why do we, I was telling you, we study everything except religious life. We study everything systematically except religious life. And I believe I'm 100% it is. I'll tell you a small example. I told you, consecrated life unfolds in a threefold relationship. Suppose consecration, communion, mission. Your provincial or your superior is asking you to write a report about your community. How do you write a report? You have to have some understanding, a systematic understanding how to write a comprehensive report. Now, you look at 3 dimensions: consecration, communion, mission. You have a wonderful report. And last section on economy at the service of all the 3. Now, consecration, what is it? All the things that you do in the community to nurture your own and the community's relationship with God. All those things will come under that consecration. So, daily prayers, morning prayer, meditation, liturgy, novena, monthly recollection, annual retreats, and spiritual director, spiritual direction. And all those matters will come, and special novenas and special prayers, all those things that contributes to your personal and communitarian relationship with God will come under the section on consecration. Now, communion. All the things that pertaining to your life as a community. How do we interact with each other? And how does a superior relate to, and do we listen to one another? Are there quarrels and conflict among, and what are the things you do with regard to the contribution of communion in community? And do you have communitarian meal, communitarian prayer, communitarian apostolate? Do you think and planning, either a monthly planning meeting, community meeting, and a common picnics, which you do, all those things that contributes to the community, and then your relationship with the public, your relationship with the parish priest, and your relationship with the religious living in the neighborhood, your religious relationship with the panchayat communion, your relationship also with the bishop of the area, and of the fellow religious, and the presbyterian, and your public government officials. All those aspects will be brought under the section on communion. Third, mission. What is the mission entrusted to the community? We are running a dispensary or a daycare center or a charity home, and a home for the children with HIV positive, or you are running a senior citizens home, or you're running a small hospital, or someone do pastoral ministry, parish ministry, and youth ministry, or charismatic group training, and so different thing, you see. Okay, okay, so all those things will come under mission. Lastly, I said no, economy at the service of all the above. How do you, for example, you're saying, that you are praying consecration. How economy at the service of all the 3? First of all, suppose you are praying in the chapel, but your prayer is disturbed by constant mosquitoes are biting you. And so the superior looked at the chapel, no mosquito net for the chapel windows. So in order that my sisters can pray well in the community, we shall prepare a small budget and present to the provincial, provide us with the mosquito proofing for the windows and doors of the chapel, rupees 10,000 economy. You prepare a budget. And then community, how your economy at the service of the community for the common meal, the thing. And, now this year we have 10 sisters in the community. In the recreation room, we have only 4 chairs. And now 6 sisters more have come. And so a budget to purchase 6 more chairs for the room. And then you're watching TV, and our TV is our sisters, some of the senior citizens, they can't hear. very well. It's an old TV, 25 years old. So in order that our senior sisters can hear well, we need to have a new TV, rupees 35,000. Now, mission. We have been running a kindergarten, a play school, but we started the mission. We have been running it our own drawing room only all these years. Now we need to put up a separate structure for the children to play and play school, and a separate structure. Okay, rupees 5 lakhs. I hope you see. See, so once you study this basic structure, it will give you a structured way of thinking as religious. And so somebody is asking you to write a report, you will be able to write an excellent report, provided you understand these things. So this is not simply joke. That such a systematic theological reflection has not been given to us. Even though it is a lived reality, we don't reflect systematically on it. That's why I told you, I believe when I say we study everything except religious life. And that is why we ended up also in this way. Several of the problems also related to this. We will see more and more when we see this. So consecrated unfolds into threefold relationship. 2, the original and the essential characteristics of consecrated life deal with this threefold relationship. These essential elements point to, explicate, and amplify the above threefold aspects of consecration, communion, mission in their foundational sense. For example, what is the real meaning of consecration? Do you know? We use the word without understanding what it means. In order to know what is consecration to God is, what is involved in consecration, what are the essential elements that constitute consecration, we have to see, search, and discover. That is why we do this with the essential elements. Let us elucidate these. Let us elucidate these original and essential characteristics, foundational theme tracing from the original and the first form of consecrated life, namely the desert tradition. Because that is seed, I told you. We often not interested because somebody said already, the old story, desert father, somebody went to the desert, and this is the way we see. But we don't see what are the underlying dynamics, the values that they were trying to live, which are vital even today. And we have to discover that. On the desert, the tree is somewhere hidden in the seed. All the essential elements of consecrated life are present in the original form. Some are very explicit and others are latently hidden. I have explained this to you. We must remember that. We must remember, this is also very important. We must remember that. We must remember that these essential elements are values or dispositions intrinsic to consecrated life and in tune with the authentic foundations of human life. But they can be lived in a variety of forms by different forms of consecrated life. See, this is something which we need to discover. Everything that we are called upon to live are not unnatural. Everything that we are called upon to live are values which are intrinsic to consecrated life. At the same time, they are also in tune with the authentic foundations of human life. They don't destroy humanity. Just because you become a religious, you don't suppress, repress, destroy your humanity. Grace builds on human nature and makes it better, makes it more creative, more vibrant, more lively, which means your chastity, poverty, obedience are meant to make you more vibrant, more alive. I'll give you a small example. Small example, provided you understand them correctly. We talked about obedience, no? For some people, obedience means listening to superior. That's all. But my dear sisters and brothers, to obey, ob audire, attentive listening. Obedience is first and foremost attentive listening to your own life as a whole. Attentive listening. For example, when you wait for a bus to go somewhere, you have to do attentive listening. You have to see which bus I need to get in, what number, and this number bus, where all it goes. Suppose it had a breakdown. How do I get to my new place? You have to have a sense of direction, attentive listening. And when the bus comes, whether the door of the bus is the front or back, front is for the women, backside is for the men. You have to know this, attentive listening. When you get into the bus, where to sit, attentive listening. Who is the conductor? Who is the driver? And how to pay the money, attentive listening. How much to pay, attentive listening. And when you want to get down, you have to inform, you have to listen, attentively listen. Where am I going? Which direction? Whether the bus has reached my place, attentive listening. And when you wake up from your seat in order to get down, you have to listen to the conductor. You have to listen to the driver. You also have to listen to the bus. Where the door is, I can get out. And how many steps are there for the door of the bus? It's only one step, a low floor bus, or 3 tired steps. All these things I need to look. Attentive listening, ob audire. Now, do you understand now? To obey means engage your full senses to the reality around you. Thereby, the purpose of the Lord is to make you an effective evangelizer, an efficient evangelizer, so that your presence become an effective presence. I told you, if you didn't listen to the door of the bus, thinking only one step, you just put the thing and you fell down and destroy, and your head hit against the stone, and you had your brain is damaged. Will you become an effective presence? Now, I only just said a small example. Believe me when I repeat what the Lord said. I have come to give you life, that to the fullness. I want you to be alive, to be vibrant, to be creative, to be full of life. This is the purpose of obedience. But we have narrowed it to an understanding, superior and me. Finished. Okay, we'll come to that later when we have the session on counsels. We might teach you this. Okay. And also, my concern is to tell you, we must remember that these essential elements are values intrinsic to consecrated life, and they are in tune with the authentic foundations of human life. They build up your humanity. I give you only one example. You can go into every vow and I'll show you how every vow is basically to help you, develop your own empowerment as a person for God, committed to God. Not empowerment for a life for the world, an empowerment for a life for the kingdom of God. Provided you understand authentic foundations of human life. Our counsels do not destroy our humanity. They build it up. But they can be lived in a variety of forms by different forms of consecrated life. They could also be seen as further refined expressions of the archetypal values values in the collective consciousness of humanity. We will see that more of it. See, for example, just archetypal values in the collective consciousness of humanity, which means through our life, we are articulating, expressing, and living values which are very fundamental to humanity and world. These are best kept secret in religious life. I said we are called to live out values which are very fundamental and vital to the survival of life and the world. I'll give you one small example. What is involved in chastity? One of the dimensions of chaste loving is capacity for unconditional love. Now, tell me, can you imagine a world where there is no unconditional love at all? If there is no unconditional love, none of us will be existing in this world today. Our parents loved us unconditionally. And that is why you are alive today. Isn't it true? And that is why the Lord said, it is I who loved you first. God's love, unconditional love of God, mediated through the parents, flowing into us, laid our foundation. Before we learn to love, we have been loved. Unconditional love. Unconditional love is essential to humanity and its survival. And we are living that love. Another dimension, respectful love. Respectfully loving. A love which is free from possession. A love that is free, liberated, and a love that is a chaste love is a respectful, generous, unconditional love, non-possessive, non-discriminative, love. Don't you think such a love is fundamental to humanity and its survival? This is the question. That's why the last statement. They could also be seen as further refined expressions of the archetypal values in the collective consciousness of humanity. Okay. Now, all right. Now, what I am going to do, we have to see, because tomorrow we have a session, and then after that only one more session. Next week, Saturday also, no, Robin, 2 I have covered, today 2, and then one more, no?
Yeah,
Robin?
Saturday you will finish, brother.
Yeah, Saturday we finish. Yeah, this is my problem. Yeah, okay. Now when you give a explanation, okay. I may not be, now we will do one thing, because this is very fundamental. So I will cover this little, and then we will go into the history, the rest of the history. See, I'm doing it only for the desert tradition because it is a seed, and once we elucidate the essential elements, then you know that these elements are present in the successive forms also. So then it becomes easy. So that is why this is, to me, this is what I call by a foundational understanding. So what we are going to do is, what are the essential elements that constitute religious life, consecrated life? Apart from the externals, what are the things that constitute you as an authentic religious? We are going to see one by one. One, a deep sense of being drawn by the person of Jesus in the gospel. Now, you don't have to run to the desert, but ask whether you have this. You don't have to be Ignatius of Loyola or Anthony of the desert. You don't have to be, but ask whether you have this. A deep sense of being drawn by the person of Jesus in the gospel. Jesus, his person, his life, his ministry, and his message is this ruling, guiding, passion of your life. Then you are an authentic religious. One fundamental thing. Two, that we can explain, but I don't want to explain. It takes time, a deep sense of being drawn by the person of Jesus. So it is not any cricket stars or beauty stars or political stars or film stars that are to rule your heart. Jesus, his kingdom, his life, his ministry, his message becomes a central passion of my life, passion for God and passion for humanity. Two, I'm just passing through fast. Fascination with the treasure hidden in the field. You know that expression? Kingdom of God can be compared to a treasure hidden in the field. Someone who sows and finds it and he's so overjoyed, he goes back and sells everything and comes to buy the field. The same experience. We have to go through that experience of that person who was in search of the fine pearl. So, in other words, fascination with the kingdom of God as mediated, symbolized, proclaimed, and expressed by Jesus in the gospel. What the Lord was standing for, what was he speaking about, what was his passion for, what did he dedicate his life for? That project of the revolutionary project of God's reign and God's kingdom. Are you drawn to that? Don't worry, you become Antony or Pachomius and all that. Don't worry how many demons came and attacked Antony and all that. It's okay. But this do you have? Three, a passionate and fervent desire to respond to the call of Jesus to radical discipleship. Are you passionate and a fervent, consistent desire to respond to the call of Jesus to radical discipleship? I want to follow the Lord. I want to be a disciple of him. Of course, I have my limitations. Sometimes I fall. Sometimes I am frail. I make, but still a passionate and fervent desire. Or are you lukewarm in your heart? Passionless. Living stagnant life. Drowsy existence. Passionate and fervent desire to respond to the call of Jesus' radical discipleship. 4. Taken all the three above together, it means an ever-growing, and unceasing fascination with the Christ of the gospel, and an honest and sincere attempt to respond to his call. Do you have it? Ask yourself these questions when we are doing this examination. We are doing exposition. Ask yourself, these are the essential elements that constitute our religious vocation.